Good afternoon and welcome to today's Industry Week webcast, the differences between cloud and hosted ERP and why they matter, sponsored by Rootstock. My name is John Hitch, Senior Technology Writer for Industry Week. Now before we begin, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First, if at any time you are having audio difficulties or slides are not advancing, simply hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please press the Help button to receive assistance in solving common issues. This webinar technology allows you to resize the presentation by clicking the Maximize icon or by dragging the lower right corner to enlarge the window. We welcome your questions during today's event. In order to submit your questions to today's presenters, simply type your question into the window on the left side of your screen and then hit the Submit button. We'll be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation. But please feel free to send in your questions at any time and we'll add them to the queue. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the Industry Week website within the next week for you to review. You'll be notified by email when the archive is available. And on your console, the Rootstock logo is hot-linked. If you want to visit their website during the webcast, you can click on the logo and a new window will open. This will not take you out of the webinar. Now let me introduce you to today's presenters. Frank Scavo is the president of Computer Economics, an IT research firm based in Irvine, California, where he covers the enterprise software industry. In addition to his work as an industry analyst, he has been leading ERP selection projects for clients since 1989. Frank is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and a certified fellow in production and inventory management by APICS, the Association for Supply Chain Management. Next, we have Tom Brennan. He is Rootstock's CMO. Tom has 30 years of professional experience in ERP and business software. He has held many executive roles, including being at Financial Force, where he was the VP of Marketing. Welcome, Frank and Tom. The floor is yours.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks very much. And this is Frank Scavo, President of Computer Economics. Very happy to get started this morning or today on this webcast. We're going to talk about the differences between cloud and hosted ERP and why they matter. So let me just start for a minute here and tell you a little bit about Computer Economics. I'm the president of Computer Economics. I'm the current owner. I wasn't here when the firm was founded in 1979, but it has a long and proud history providing metrics for IT management. So we do things like collect metrics and ratios on IT spending and staffing. We do an IT salary report. We track outsourcing, technology adoption, best practices. And we also do IT strategy consulting and benchmarking services. So along that line, we also offer, through our sister consulting firm, we offer services to buyers of enterprise software. So as was mentioned earlier, I've been doing this for a very long time. I'm familiar with all of the major vendors and most of the minor ones, have evaluated them in competitive deals, and have gotten to know them over the years, including over the last 10 or 12, 15 years, all the cloud ERP vendors as well. So I want to share a little bit with you today about what we've learned and some of the distinctions in this market, because there is a lot of confusion out there when people talk about cloud systems and specifically around cloud ERP. So in this presentation, we're going to cover what is cloud ERP and how does it differ from hosted ERP, and do those differences matter? Depending on what they are, why do we care if there is a difference? What are the things that really matter when we're evaluating systems? And then factors that are going to affect your decision on whether you select a cloud or a hosted ERP solution, and some of the special considerations that we take forward when we're helping clients evaluate potential ERP systems. So I'm going to share with you some of the tricks of the trade, some of the things that we look at when we're helping buyers. So the first thing I want to share with you all is that, as we all know, cloud systems have become very, very popular over the last 10 or 12 or 15 years. in certain categories of enterprise software. So, you think about, sectors like customer relationship management, CRM. You think about, HR and HCM systems. You think about certain departmental solutions. Cloud solutions or software as a service or SaaS has really become, the dominant software model for delivering software to businesses today. So in some of these categories like CRM, all the major solutions today, starting with Salesforce, and of course we know Oracle, Microsoft, even SAP and others, have all put forth, cloud-based CRM systems. And it seems like nobody is really building on-premises software anymore in the CRM sector. And that can be said a lot as well for human capital management and other categories of enterprise software. But what about ERP? So ERP I've been calling it, kind of the last stand for on-premises systems. There's still a lot of on-premises ERP systems out there. There's less of it being sold today, but it has been a slower market to accept software as a service or cloud systems as a delivery model. So, and by the way, there's a full report behind this. You can get everybody who attends this webinar or listens to it can get a free copy of that report. We do sell it on our website, but we're offering it at no charge to those that attend this webinar. So in there we say, in the battle for the hearts and minds of business leaders, ERP has been something of a last stand for on-premises systems. So why is that? What's so hard about ERP? Or we should say, why has it been slower to move to the cloud? Well, first, these are large, complex interdepartmental systems that are very difficult to just kind of rip out and replace. And many companies that I've seen find it easier over a period of many years to just continue to modify and work around the problems that they're having with those ERP systems. And until, recently, cloud ERP is become very popular, but has not been available for all industries or even sub-industry sectors. So there's some areas where the best solutions still are older systems. But that's changing. That's changing very rapidly. Resistance to the cloud is falling generally among business leaders. The number of the cloud ERP providers has been increasing, especially over the last 5-7 years. And the functionality gaps between the older traditional ERP systems and the newer cloud-based systems has been narrowing. So today you can get cloud ERP in for industries and businesses that you couldn't get in the past. So it's becoming more and more of a threat to the traditional providers from cloud ERP. And so what do the traditional providers do? Well, they have to do something because they can see the cloud ERP providers are starting to encroach upon their market share. So many of them took the easy step of responding by simply hosting their traditional on-premises systems in their own data centers or in a partner data center. So hosting, we're getting into the kind of the definition of hosting. So pure hosting in its purest form is really no different from on-premises deployment. The only thing that changes is that the location of the system, instead of being in your data center, is in the service provider's data center. There's no architectural changes made to the product. The system, the provider does not share computing resources across multiple clients to save computing resources, make more efficient use of those. They may and often do offer it on a subscription basis instead of a license basis, which is good for many companies. But really the system in its basic nature and architecture has not changed. So we call this hosting. The vendors offering this never refer to it as hosting. They refer to it as cloud or SaaS or on-demand, which really confuses buyers, because when you look at an offering, how do you know whether it's merely hosting or it's a true cloud ERP system? So that's what we're going to talk about today is what are those differences and why do they matter? At this point, there is a complication. So I said on the previous slide that in its pure form, hosting is really no different than on-premises deployment. But actually, some of the traditional vendors have gone a little bit farther than just pure hosting. Many of them now offer their traditional solutions on a virtualized infrastructure at the infrastructure or the database layer. So they're bringing in some cloud infrastructure, which is certainly better than a pure, physical hosting. This does allow them to pool some resources among customers, building on a virtual infrastructure. And some of them have added pure cloud options to their traditional system. So for example, I might do in a professional services environment, I might do time collection on a web-based cloud point solution, right? So I have a traditional hosted system, but I have some features like travel and expense or time reporting or other features that in fact are add-ons that are in fact cloud-based. So you have a range of options between kind of pure hosted and something that's getting a little more virtualized and towards some of the benefits that you get with cloud. And then on the cloud ERP side, there's a variation between how, if I can use the word, how cloudy various providers are. So some of them are very strongly cloud-oriented. Some of them, on the other hand, have some features that are not as cloudy as they could be. And I'm going to talk about what some of that is here. So there's a whole spectrum of deployment options, all the way from on-premises to what I would call pure cloud. And so you have to distinguish when you look at either a hosted or a cloud ERP environment, where do they fall upon the spectrum? And again, why does it matter? So I'm going to talk about that here. So the best definition of cloud computing, I mean, a lot of analysts and consultants come up with their own definitions of what is cloud, what is not cloud. I decided a long time ago that it was best to use kind of an objective definition that is widely recognized by industry. So I like the NIST definition of cloud computing, which was put out by NIST, which is a agency within, or it's a part of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, U.S. federal government, that's used in federal government procurement. So I like this because it's a simple definition. There's nobody that has a horse in the race. They're simply defining what is cloud in terms of these 5 characteristics. So this is a yardstick. So you can use this to evaluate any service, whether it's software as a service or infrastructure as a service. You can use this to say how cloudy is it. Right? So the first characteristic is what's called resource pooling, is that the provider serves multiple customers using a multi-tenant model at the infrastructure layer or the application software as a service layer. So pooling resources across multiple customers. The second is what's called on-demand self-service. So you allow the customer to directly provision features and functions of the system without having to go through a support desk, right? You can do it through a web-based interface. You can provision your own services. The third is what's called rapid elasticity, which means the system automatically rapidly increases or cuts back computing resources as are required to accommodate changes in demand. So you don't need to plan in advance. Hey, tomorrow is we're having our spring sale. There's going to be a huge rush on our website. There's going to be 10 times the normal number of orders. You don't need to notify the provider in advance to scale up those resources. The system automatically adjusts or cuts back the resources allocated to meet that demand. So rapid elasticity. The fourth one is broad network access, which means that you can access the system over a network using standard protocols, using a variety of end user devices. You're not restricted in how you access the system. And then finally at the top is it's a measured service. So the system automatically controls, optimizes, and reports usage to the customer. And this implies usage-based pricing. So the more you use, the more you pay. The less you use, the less you pay. And so the easy example for anyone to think, you look at Amazon. I mean, you basically, anybody can walk up to Amazon's website and take a credit card and buy an instance of a server operating system and use it for 10 minutes and shut it down, and you pay for what you get. So it displays all of these characteristics. We're going to see in a minute, when you get to cloud ERP, some of these characteristics sometimes are not fully met. So we'll talk about that. So let's go on to the next slide. So like I said, so we need some criteria. With these criteria, we can compare and contrast cloud and hosted ERP. So in terms of resource pooling, cloud ERP fully meets this definition. A true multi-tenant cloud system will share computing resources, computing power, CPUs, and storage across multiple clients. With hosted ERP, in the worst case, we're deploying dedicated resources for each customer. You have your server, you have your storage, the next customer has its servers and storage, and so on. Better with hosted is when they run the customer's ERP instance on a virtual server or even on a public infrastructure like Amazon or Microsoft Azure. But still, they do not achieve a high level of resource pooling as cloud ERP does. An on-demand self-service, generally cloud ERP does provide that. For the most part, very often you can configure the system on your own without requiring a vendor or partner to submit service requests for them to do that. Typically with a hosted ERP, you have to work through a vendor or partner. And if you want something new to be turned on, you go to the support desk and you submit a change request. The best cloud ERP systems do not fully require you to do that, but allow you to turn on or turn off functionality through a configuration panel that you can control. Rapid elasticity. Generally, cloud ERP does provide this. You can receive a surge in new orders or a surge in transactions. The system will react to that and provide an elastic response. However, on the other hand, let me go back to a hosted ERP. Typically, you're going to have to submit a notification to your service provider to expect a increase in demand that you're going to have to recognize, and even in some cases submit a change order. Now, on the cloud ERP side, from what I have seen, in some cases, some of the cloud ERP providers are not fully elastic. They will, in advance, define how much resources in terms of bandwidth, storage, computing resources you are going to require, and you sign up for that as part of your contract. Typically, they will let you increase that with some notification, but depending on how they contract for that, they may not allow you to cut back. So this is an area where you need to really examine up front how elastic the cloud ERP service is. So this is one area where some providers are not as cloudy as others. Broad network access, I would say almost universally, cloud ERP providers allow you to use just about any browser. Of course, many times it has to be a more current browser, use a variety of mobile devices and so on. With hosted ERP, if it's, now there's nothing to stop a hosted ERP provider from doing that as well. But in fact, if it's an older technology, they may limit your choice of end user devices. So they may require you to use a certain browser. They may not support a certain smartphone or tablet. They may not support mobile devices except with a web browser. The worst case, and I've seen some hosted ERP providers that actually are really client-server systems, so they require you to use desktop virtualization, either Microsoft Remote Desktop or Citrix or some other remote desktop, which really shows that the architecture hasn't changed. It's really a client-server system that they are just hosting. And then on measured service, let's talk about hosted first. Typically with a hosted ERP system, it's typically fixed price for a contract term. So you're going to pay for a year, 2 years, or 3 years. It's not measuring the service on a day-to-day or week-to-week or month-to-month basis and charging you accordingly. You cannot flex up and down based upon actual consumption. You could increase, but you certainly cannot decrease. On the cloud ERP side, actually most of them do not deliver their ERP systems as a measured service. So there are reasons for that. I've discussed this with vendors because of the pre-sales effort that is required to typically sell an ERP system. They can't afford to have that be a measured service. So that is an area where cloud ERP and also many other forms of enterprise software does not fully display the NIST characteristic of a measured service. So again, as you can see, there's a range of values or a range of choices for hosted ERP and for cloud ERP as well. So you really need to distinguish when you're looking at a solution what it is that you're actually getting. The next way to understand the difference between cloud and hosted ERP is to look at the benefits of software as a service and see how cloud and hosted ERP rank against one another in terms of those benefits. So this slide you're looking here is from a computer economics survey that we run annually regarding this year. I think we're up to 15 or 16 different technologies, and one of them every year has been software as a service. So one of the questions we ask buyers, organizations that are investing in software as a service, so this is software as a service generally, not just ERP, is what benefits do you think are most important? When you choose software as a service, what are the benefits that you see from doing that? And so we listed, what is this? This is 10 benefits here. We asked them to rank, and then we averaged the rankings on a scale of 1 to 10. And this is how they rank. So the top benefit is reduced infrastructure. We can understand it's very easy to see that you don't have to have any computing infrastructure. Rapid implementation they see as a high benefit. Flexibility and agility, we'll talk about what that means in a minute. Scalability, which we've been talking a little bit about already. Availability or disaster recovery is another benefit of software as a service. Somebody else is doing that for you. Ease of upgrades, we'll talk about what that means in a minute. And then you see we've drawn a line here after that because we can see that there's kind of a jump down. The last 4 are less highly rated. So we view all of these as benefits of software as a service, but in terms of what buyers value the most, they don't value the cost savings, which we do believe there is with software as a service. They actually don't consider subscription pricing to be a huge benefit compared to the others. They don't see as much reduced IT staff, and they don't see it as improved security. Again, we see all these as benefits. I can tell you why, but buyers do not rank those as highly, the last 4. So let's talk about, when we compare, we're going to talk about the first 6 first and then the second 4. So let's talk about how cloud ERP versus hosted ERP ranks in these 6 benefits. So reduced IT infrastructure. With cloud ERP, all infrastructures provided and maintained by the service provider. Well, guess what? Hosted ERP, same benefit. So on this benefit, actually, if you're mainly looking to get out of the data center business, as we say, you want to focus on your business, not running a data center, either cloud or hosted ERP will help you get there. Okay, rapid implementation. Cloud ERP supports this because it eliminates all the upfront installation of hardware and software. For hosted ERP, typically it's the same benefit there, except that the provider is responsible for that installation. There actually has to be the same installation you would do if you had that system on premises. You would still have to, the provider goes through the same steps, only you don't see it because it's in the provider's data center. I had an ERP system implementation, I should say a selection, and one of the providers was offering a hosted ERP option. There was also a couple cloud ERP providers bidding on the deal. The hosted ERP vendor came back with, I think, something like 60 days to configure and install the system and the database. I said, this is not cloud, right? Because if you need 60 days to configure the system, obviously you're doing a lot of installation work that shouldn't be required if the system was really a cloud system. So that kind of betrayed the fact that, yeah, this was not a cloud system, it was hosted. Third point, flexibility and agility. How does cloud ERP support that? This is, to me, is really the big difference, right? So a true cloud ERP system is going to have frequent or even continual upgrades to the service. Some of those you will see as new features and functions. Some of them you will not see as they're bug fixes or things behind the scene. And also, you have, in many cases, what we call platform as a service, which allows the buyer or a service partner to extend the system, either with customizations or even new functionality that can extend the cloud ERP system with new features and functions. With hosted ERP, typically the customer has to go through an upgrade experience that is similar to what that customer goes through with an on-premises system. So the service provider is going to be responsible for applying the new version, but you're still going to have to go through the pain and suffering of retrofitting any changes that you've made to the system and so on. There's nothing that's happening behind the scenes. You're going through a periodic upgrade or upgrade revision of that system. And typically, there is no real platform as a service if you're talking about a hosted ERP system. Scalability, as we mentioned earlier, if they're truly a cloud ERP system, you're going to have unlimited computing resources available to you to handle spikes in demand. With hosted ERP, you don't have that scalability. You're going to have to order those resources in advance. Availability and disaster recovery, the service provider is responsible for all backups and recovery. That's a benefit of cloud. Guess what? A good hosted ERP provider is going to provide that through their data center as well. So they can provide that benefit too. Ease of upgrades, which we mentioned also in the flexibility point. You're getting frequent continual upgrades to the service and does not require you to have a technical effort of your internal IT staff. Those changes are applied to the service without your interaction with it. With hosted ERP, typically not to the same extent. Typically, an upgrade is as painful as an on-premises upgrade as well. So looking forward to, we'll take questions at the end if you have any comments on this or what you think, if you think these benefits are important to you as well. With those the bottom four benefits, again, we believe that according to our research, cloud ERP does achieve cost savings, especially when you combine it with moving more of your systems out of your own data center into the cloud. The cloud ERP is a lower cost platform for the provider, which should allow them to price it more cost effectively for customers, but that's of course up to the provider if they're going to pass on those savings. Hosted ERP by nature is a higher cost platform for providers. Typically, they will not be able to compete as well on price with the cloud providers. Subscription pricing allows you to move capital expenditures to operating expense, which means a much lower upfront cost. And I like that it's also less risk of shelfware. If after the contract period is over, you find the system is not serving you well, you have not made a sunk cost investment in a license, and you can simply not renew that subscription. If the hosted ERP provider provides subscription pricing, of course, they can provide that same benefit. Reduced IT staff. There is an elimination of the infrastructure support staff, so you're going to be able to save there. You can achieve the same kind of benefit with hosted ERP, but it's kind of more like the benefit that you'll get from just outsourcing your data center. So it may not be as significant. Improved security. Many of the traditional providers raise fear, uncertainty, and doubt around security of cloud systems. Our research tells us that what the cloud providers can offer in terms of security far exceeds what an internal IT organization can attain. So we do not believe that cloud systems are a security risk. Hosted ERP, if it's deployed correctly in the service provider's data center, should be able to provide very good security as well, better than what many internal IT organizations can attain. So that is also a benefit of hosted ERP. So what's the bottom line? From our view, cloud ERP benefits over hosted ERP are substantial, and there is a cost savings. Our research shows that another report that we have shows that organizations that move over half of their applications to the cloud spend much less on IT relative to their industry peers. So we went back and we actually benchmarked a number of our survey respondents, looked at their total IT spending, compared them to their industry peers, and those that were highly invested in the cloud, in fact, did spend, I think, something like 15 to 20% less on IT. And interestingly, they were able to focus their IT spending more on innovations and new initiatives rather than ongoing support. So we do believe that cloud ERP can deliver very significant benefits. So I think this is very important for anyone that's considering a new ERP system to carefully evaluate, what their options are, whether it be cloud or hosted ERP. So now let's talk about some of the factors that are going to affect your choice. So one of the things I hope you realize here is that, coming into this presentation, you might have thought that, cloud was all good, hosted was all bad. Well, actually, as we do software evaluation and selection services, in some cases we actually do consider hosted ERP for some of the deals that we look at. And there are some cases where, in fact, hosted ERP would be a good option. One of them, which I mentioned earlier, has to do with functionality fit. If you just cannot find the functionality you need for your industry or your organization in any cloud ERP system, but a traditional provider offering a hosted solution does fit your business, I think definitely you should be looking at the possibility of looking at a hosted solution. In some cases, there's some areas of the world where the cloud ERP providers do not serve out of local data centers. In some cases, data residency rules and laws, for example, in the European Union, in other regions of the world, might require you to have a data center co-located in that region. In some cases, you'd be necessary to look at a hosted ERP option to get that as well. Customization integration, as we mentioned earlier, the platform as a service does allow cloud ERP to be customized and extended. But in some cases where you have very significant customization requirements that requires you to go in and go more deeply into the base system, it might make more sense for you to have a single tenant hosted environment where the service provider can give you that level of customization. So again, not everyone's going to be the same on this, but it's something that might cause you to consider looking at a hosted ERP solution. And then on compliance, I have a lot of experience in FDA regulated industries, and as many of you may know, FDA requires customers to validate software that supports regulatory compliance should be validated to intended use. If you're using your ERP system to support some regulatory compliance, it will be necessary for you to validate that system. I personally believe that you can validate a cloud ERP system in support of regulatory requirements. Others don't see it that way. And some may choose to go with a hosted solution where they have more control over the system installation and can ensure that the system is not changing on a day-to-day basis. So In some cases, it might just be easier not to fight that battle and go with a single tenant hosted solution where the service provider can give you that level of support for compliance. So that might be another case where it might be appropriate to be looking at a hosted ERP system. Here's a short list. Actually, if you look at the full report, download that after the webinar. We go through and discuss each of these. I won't go into all of them in detail right now, but it's more complex to negotiate a cloud or a hosted contract than it is an on-premises where you're just buying a license. Because you're going to be relying upon that service provider to take care of you and to operate that system on your behalf on a day-to-day basis. So you got to be now looking about things like, well, how are you going to deal with version upgrades? You say the system is secure, but I want to hear from your chief security officer what you're really doing behind the scenes. What's the experience been with availability? How often does the system go down? You say, it's less than 5 minutes of, unscheduled downtime. But how much scheduled downtime do you need to operate the system? Is the system really scalable? What happens if I throw 10 times the transactions at you in the next hour? How is the system going to respond to that? And these are things you can reference check as well. You want to look at some of the, any hidden or variable costs and subscriptions. Some cloud ERP providers will charge you extra if you exceed your storage limits. You want to understand what that is. And of course, look at the total cost of ownership. Factor in all the costs that you have today with your current system in terms of your own internal support and see how that compares, going forward. So there's a lot of factors here that you need to consider when you're negotiating a contract. If you haven't done these before, you might want to look at some outside help to do that. And so I think we are ready to go on to some comments. And before we do that, Tom, I think you have been keeping an eye on any questions that have been coming in here. I'd actually like to ask Tom Brennan from Rootstock a few questions. Tom, you have been, you're still on the line, right?
I sure am, Frank. Nice job.
Good. Okay, good. I think we've got a few minutes here. So, Tom, you and I and your coworkers there typically sit on opposite sides of the table during a vendor negotiation, right? You're representing, obviously, Rootstock, cloud ERP provider. I am representing, and my consultants here representing buyers. So usually we don't, talk like this, but but I'd like to get your view on some of these. So, how do you feel about, Rootstock has been around, as I recall, what now, 10 years? Has it been 10 years?
It'll be 9 years. Yeah, 9. Yep.
9 years. Okay. Things have had to change over the last 10 years. Are buyers more receptive to cloud ERP as a concept than they were when you guys first started? And
yeah, absolutely. I think, there's a couple reasons. One is, we rebuilt our ERP product from the ground up for the way manufacturing is today. And so you're rebuilding and starting a new system. And so it takes a while to mature an application so that it's got everything you need. And so we're well into that. And now we have a product that not only can match a legacy system in terms of functionality, but actually exceed it, especially for the way, say, manufacturers, distributors operate today. And so it's pretty natural, frankly, for the market not to go, I'm going to jump into cloud because, cloud was fairly new. And the products, not just ours, but others, were not mature enough. So you can understand why they would wait. But that's not the case now. So you can, get something better, not only from, the platform and all the other things that you talked about, but straight up functionality. I think what's also happened is we're shifting now from not why cloud, but which cloud. And the importance of the platform and that choice has become a strategic choice in the system that you're going to buy. And it's a lot like, you may remember mainframes. I'm not sure you're old enough for that, Frank, but
I'm definitely old enough for that.
But those days or in other years, you sort of, a lot of IT companies would pick a computing platform of some kind, but now what's happening is there's choices being made about cloud platforms. And so the discussion is not just about the ERP app, but it's, hey, what am I going to run in my business? How am I going to make that run? So we are spending more time with things like this on not why cloud, but also which cloud.
Excellent. So I talked about, the differences between cloud and hosted ERP. Do you see a lot of confusion in the market when you talk to buyers that, they don't see what's hosted and what's cloud?
I do.
But what is the difference? I mean, in your view,
Yeah, I just want to address the first part of what you said, and then the second. I think, there's no wonder there is confusion, because what a lot of the ERP suppliers have done, a lot of them fought cloud because it was a threat to their licensing business model and the way they had worked and all the sunken costs they had in those products. And so basically, as I said, you have to re-architect, start all over. And so a lot of them resisted it. And so then a lot of vendors, and traditional ones that a lot of people know and love, have been what's called cloud washing. And they're attaching cloud to everything they do, whether it really is or not, as you pointed out. So like hosting's been around for a long time, but people call that cloud. So it creates confusion in the marketplace. And so that's what I think is kind of confused folks, frankly, and I can't blame them because of what was done in the market. But there are huge differences, and you alluded to several of them. But when you look at something that's truly built on a multi-tenanted cloud platform, which means it's built to be able to be upgradable through time, that's one of the biggest issues with legacy apps is trying to get through upgrades. And even if you go in a hosting type situation, it's still a painful process. Versus a true multi-tenanted cloud app is built so that you can add to it, change it, upgrade, move, and keep continually improving. And so that's one giant difference at the platform level with that. And the second one is related to the platform as a service. There's ways to kind of build a cloud app that sits on an infrastructure, but you don't get a lot of common services that are available to all your apps. And so I'll give you an example. Our product is built on the Salesforce platform, and when we built it, we automatically inherited all the dashboarding tools, reporting tools, analytics, Chatter, which is their social media app, their workflow app, and mobile apps, just by being on the platform, and even their communities that they provide customers, their portals, if you will. So when we built on the app, we inherited all those other things, which are also the same things used by the CRM teams in companies. And so that we didn't have to go build all that stuff, or a customer doesn't have to paste them together. And you'll see a lot of cloud diagrams that look a little bit like one of the ones you had. It's like a stack diagram, and it's a stack of technology that the buyer actually has to integrate. There's still integrators of all that stuff. In the cloud, in the Salesforce world, that stuff's all provided to you. It's part of a holistic environment that end users can add and change rather than IT folks. So that's, to me, is a big difference.
Interesting. So you feel that the Salesforce platform has basically saved you guys a lot of time and effort that you would have spent building that tool set underneath your product, right? You don't have to focus on any of that stuff, right?
We don't. We can focus on functionality, and they're like our R&D organization. And the beauty is, if, for instance, if a customer has Salesforce, they've already got somebody who knows how to administer it. They already have people who know how to write reports and run the workflow and everything else. So now you have not just, it's easier for us, but it's easier for the customer, because the customer, it's just got one environment to deal with, and they'll know how to add to it and everything else. So what we're seeing in some cases is people are adding these different clouds or hosted clouds, and it's really what we used to call Franken cloud of different things, and they're different architectures. They're different operating environments to deal with that have to be dealt with. And it actually starts at the user level, because the user is going to look at one system and log into another. It's two different worlds, and the reporting, the database is in two different places, the reporting and everything else. So we feel it provides us a holistic environment with all those services, plus we have the CRM engine there too that we actually use as part of our ERP
Right.
product. The
Right.
days of separate ERP and CRM are gone in my view.
Yeah. Hey, listen, let me, so I got you on the phone. Let me ask you a question. It seems that when, Rootstock is not the largest ERP vendor, in the world, but building on a platform with an elastic cloud, is there really any limitation to the size customer you guys could support?
No, Salesforce has got, giant companies on it. We have a user, it's got 25,000 users. So, that's quite a scale. Because it is elastic, that's not an issue in the way things have done these days. So you don't have to worry about that.
And what about on the small side? Is there anything that would stop you from selling to like a 5-user license or 15 or?
No, there's nothing that really stops us. I think it's a matter of whether how much the company needs. Do they need the power and all the functionality of a system like this? And some people don't, and they want to start with something very simple to start with. They might just automate, say, inventory management, and just start with that and do very manual shop floor kind of controls and things. So we do see the spectrum.
I see. So just one last question, and then hopefully we've got a few questions coming in from the audience. But you guys don't win every deal you go into. You got to lose from time to time against hosted ERP providers. I mean, what's the one or two reasons you'd see someone, say, going with a hosted traditional ERP solution?
Well, I think sometimes it's you were talking about earlier on about some companies are just not ready to go to a hosted or a cloud environment, and they'll end up in a more hosted individual mode, and it might be because of a government regulation. A lot of times we're seeing companies that they've modified their ERP system so much that they can't see a way out. And
I see.
Even though we try to help them out, but they don't, so they'll take that and they'll run it in a hosted environment. And they do get some IT benefits from that, of course, but not the full change management that you would expect.
So it's a smaller step, right? It's not as radical, not radical, but it's not as big a step as completely going with a brand new cloud solution.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've got a few more minutes. Any audience questions?
Yeah, I'm looking here. We've got, you said the subscription pricing is a benefit, but what if we want to buy a license so we can depreciate it as a capital expenditure?
There's always one of these. Interesting. I've actually encountered that. Let me start with a disclaimer that I'm not an accountant. I don't play one on TV. And if you're looking for accounting advice, please see your accounting advisor or legal advice. But I have actually have seen this. For some, most companies do see a subscription as a benefit. I mean, the big reason is you don't have this huge cash outlay at the front of the project for a license, which you're then going to depreciate over, I forget what the typical, 7 years or 10 years of depreciation. Again, not an accountant, see your accounting advisor. But so most companies do see going to subscription, a pay-as-you-go model as advantageous. And then plus, if you decide the system is not working, you're not left with this sunk cost of a license that's now sitting on the shelf, right? So generally, companies do prefer to expense a subscription rather than depreciate a license. But I have, in fact, I think it was maybe 3 years ago, actually had a client that said our management prefers to treat the software acquisition as a capital expenditure. For whatever reason, from their corporate parent, they had capital, budget, but they didn't have operational expense budget. So they preferred to depreciate a license, and they ended up with a hosted solution to do that, which ironically, at some point, they were probably going to convert that into a subscription. So they accomplished their objective. But I see this as more of a definite minority of cases. But if it's important to do that, one thing to realize, in most cases, you can actually depreciate, capitalize the implementation cost. of the new system because that's a one-time cost to put the system in. It's not as much as doing the license, but it's still something that you can expend capital, a budget on that. So,
Interesting. The next question is related to contracts as well. Is that you mentioned that cloud ERP vendors usually ask for annual contracts or longer. Why don't they offer shorter terms?
I ask that all the time. Sometimes you can get one for like, a proof of concept, hey, we want a 3-month subscription or an annual, 1 year, however many months to, do a proof, especially for a larger company, could get a 1-year proof of concept with a small number of users. But again, I've talked to the vendors about this, hey, why do you guys insist on these longer contract terms? And basically, the impression I get is to cover those pre-sales expenses. So one vendor told me that, hey, we actually don't make money on this customer until, like, I don't know what it is, after the 3rd year or something. So the first, year, 2 years, whatever it is, they're actually paying for all that pre-sales expense. I mean, basically, like I said earlier, you can walk up to Amazon, put in a credit card, and buy an operating system for, a day, a week, or a month, or whatever. Very few people, I should say, buy enterprise software that way. They want to kick the tires, they want a demo, they want a pre-sales team come out, they want a, scripted demo. And by the way, we try to really minimize the, overbearing demands on software vendors when we do demonstrations. But still, I mean, there's a lot of expense that's incurred there. And remember, they're not winning every deal, so they got to pay, for the expense for the deals that they don't win as well. So I sympathize with the fact that then, because they've had to do that much pre-sales, they have to then get a commitment for a contract for an annual term or longer. And typically, you'll get better, pricing and terms and conditions if you go with a longer contract. So. According to the NIST definition, that's not very cloudy, but for enterprise software, especially for ERP, I understand why they do that.
Yeah, I think some of the
you should answer that question, Tom. Well, why do you guys do it, right?
Yeah. Well, I would add, and actually the next question is related to this too, is I would add to that, I think from the ERP, the cloud ERP supplier, we want companies that are committed to the project and putting everything behind it. And sometimes in those, just want to try it for a while, you don't know how committed they are to do it. This is not, something like, putting up a QuickBooks or something like that.
Right.
The processes and things like that to be considered. So that's one of the reasons why we not really happy to be doing anything like that either.
Yeah.
This is related. It says, is cloud ERP really faster and easier to implement than hosted ERP? I'm going to sit back and listen to this one.
I would say generally yes, and I think it's from a couple things. One is the cloud ERP systems are just newer, right? So they have built-in features and functions that are just easier and quicker to implement, just from an ease of use standpoint. So from that standpoint, I would say yes. But having said that, I will tell you that you got to pay attention to the soft side of an ERP implementation just as much with cloud ERP as you did with the old on-premises systems. It's still all about business processes changing. It's about people's jobs changing. Therefore, you need, the people side of change, what we call change, organizational change management. Cloud doesn't deal with any of that. It's not any different. You're still changing people's jobs, job responsibilities. People still need to be aware of the change, desirous of the change, understand the change, and be trained. So I think I have seen over the 30 years I've been doing this or longer, I've seen plenty of troubled projects with traditional on-premises ERP. And I will tell you, I've seen it with true cloud ERP as well. So you got to be ready. You got to be ready for this type of project. You've got to have a time commitment from the project team. There's got to be executive buy-in and commitment to support the project and so on. So I wouldn't, and I don't think, you guys do this. And to be fair, the cloud ERP providers know this and are always promoting full attention and commitment to these types of projects because they are difficult. They're change projects.
Yeah, certainly. I think there's lots of things in the technology to make it easier, but you have to think through things. Your processes. Hey, I want a new product. Is my bill of materials different? I want to track costs different. How's my chart of accounts? So you still have that thinking, even though actually doing it's faster. But it's all that thinking, I think, and the change management you mentioned. I think you're absolutely right.
Yep.
So then the last question I've got here is: some of our executives are worried about the security of cloud systems. What's the best way to deal with this?
Yeah, so I've seen this I see less concern about this than I did in the past, but even recently I've seen usually senior executives or executives outside the IT organization express this kind of fear. I'd say the best way is not to fight it yourself. Bring in the cloud provider and have them talk about the security measures that they have in place to provide that level of security. And there's also their public audit reports and so on that they can deliver to show how they meet those security requirements. But if an executive is determined not to believe that or not to buy into that story, there's not much you can do. But I have seen executives turn around on this when they do deal directly with the experts within the software providers organization.
Yeah. I think we've seen this as time's gone on. That seems to have come up less. It seemed to be a bigger issue early on, but that's changed. But, that's all I've got for questions from the audience, Frank. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for a great presentation. Well, I'm afraid we have run out of time, and I'd like to thank our speakers, Frank Scavo and Tom Brennan, and of course, our sponsor, Rootstock. As a reminder, if you are registered as a group, please add the names and emails of everyone in attendance on the exit survey. On behalf of Industry Week, have a productive remainder of the day.